Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about the Ryzen 5 5600X 3D, and the 3D stands for 3 dudes? Just kidding. Honestly, AMD 3D V-Cache technology is kind of complicated to explain. AMD has people much smarter than me explaining how it's built on their website. I'm not going to try to prove to you that I'm smart and try to sound all technical and act like I know what I'm talking about. I'm not a nerd. I'm actually a big fan of dumbing things down so that even your mom can understand. So the gist of it is that AMD 3D V-Cache allows you to three-dimensionally stack the CPU to allow it to have more L3 cache, which should give you the slight edge over the non-3D 5600X when it comes to performance and gaming, especially when there's a lot of detail in 3D scenes in gaming. So 3D equals more cache equals more better. It's kind of AMD's last hoorah before they completely move over to the AM5 socket type. I will be directly comparing it to the 5600X. We'll run some benchmarks, we'll check thermals, we'll do some gaming, and we'll see if the 5600X 3D is the way to go if you're still rocking the AM4 socket type. It's going to be pretty sicko mode. So before we get started, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below. And every video I post will be more sicko mode than the last. All right, let's get to it. First off, let's talk about the processor. The Ryzen 5 5600X 3D is an exclusive through Micro Center, which means you physically have to go into the store because they won't ship it. Now, when you compare it directly to the Ryzen 5 5600X, you'll see that there's about triple the amount of L3 cache. It uses 105 watts over the 65 watts. It is about 3 years newer, and there's about a $70 price difference. Let's see if it's actually $70 better than the 5600X. Now, at $229, it's the same price as the Ryzen 5 7600, which is an AM5 socket type. Although, when you price out a 7600 with the full ATX motherboard and Corsair RAM, you're looking at around $471 for those three items. Now, when you price out a 5600X 3D with similar components, obviously DDR4 RAM. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, you also need to get a cooler because it does not come with a stock cooler. You're looking at around $413, which is about $55 less than the AM5 Ryzen 5. Decisions. This video is really going to be for the people still rocking the AM4 motherboards. They've already invested in DDR4 RAM. That's why I'm comparing it to the 5600X. I even threw in the 5500 just because it's my favorite budget processor. I want to see how it compares. What's up? Well, you want attention, huh? So now let's talk about the build. I'm rocking the Gigabyte Aorus B450 motherboard. It's older, but this gets the job done. The CPUs are going to be cooled by the nzxt Kraken Z73, 32 gigabytes of DDR4 G.Skill Trident Z RAM, an Asus TUF RTX 3080, a WD Black Terabyte NVMe, an EVGA 850 watt power supply, and it's all inside of the nzxt H9 Elite case. The first test I ran was the Cinebench test. During the multi-core test, the 5600X 3D beat out the 5600 and the 5500 pretty easily. It did get much warmer at 83 degrees, so it's definitely warm enough to make your nuts hang low, but honestly that's expected because it does use more power. You were looking at about 91 watts max power. Now, during the single core test, the 5600X non-3D did beat it out, which is kind of concerning because the single core speeds are very important for gaming, but we'll see how it goes. Then I ran the Furmark test. It's a 10-minute CPU stress test to generate as much heat as possible at a warm 86 degrees Celsius with the 5600X 3D, which is not great, but it is what it is. Since I have a triple fan radiator and a case that has really good airflow, heat isn't really an issue. Alright, now enough of the boring stuff. Moving on to gaming. The first game I ran was Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Now, all three processors started off neck and neck, but as the test went on and more detail came into the shots, you see that there's a severe drop in FPS with the 5500 as well as the 5600X. It wasn't as severe with the 5600X 3D, which is what I was hoping for, because it seems that AMD is proud of their three-dimensional V-Cache. And clearly with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which is a very CPU dependent game, it's helping. And the 5600X 3D actually finished with 168 average FPS versus the 154 and the 136 on the other CPUs. Nice. The next test I ran was Cyberpunk. Now with Cyberpunk, I've seen that the GPU affects the game more than the CPU, so I wasn't expecting as big of an FPS gap as Shadow of the Tomb Raider. The test was set to high settings with medium ray tracing on at 1440p, and all the processors played it pretty well. Like I said, you really need a beefy GPU if you want to play Cyberpunk, and the 5600X 3D finished at 77 FPS average versus the 75 and the 73 with the other CPUs. So it's like whatever. But I kind of figured that's how it would go with Cyberpunk. After that, I ran Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, Red Dead Redemption 2, I honestly wasn't sure what to expect. It is an open world game, which means the CPU does get utilized a lot, but there really wasn't a difference between the CPUs. Even the Ryzen 5 5500, which is a $100 CPU, did pretty well in this test. And then I finished off with some GTA 5. GTA 5, one of my favorite games, played at max settings, and right away I could see that the 5600X 3D was fighting harder to stay above 100 FPS, while the other two CPUs were consistently dropping below 100, although to the naked eye I couldn't really tell the difference. I think the biggest difference though was that the 5600X 3D was getting warmer than the other two CPUs. It was hovering in the 60s, so it's nothing to be concerned about, but overall it was a great day at the beach. Everything looked good. It is a 10-year-old game, so I expect nothing less from these CPUs. Everything was pretty sicko mode. So after all these tests, after benchmarking, after gaming, what does this all mean? Honestly, I thought all three processors performed pretty well. Now the 5600X is around $160, the 5600X 3D is around $229, and it's an exclusive with Micro Center, so you have to live near one if you actually want to get one. They do not ship it. So right off the bat, it's kind of already hard to get, which means it could be more desirable just because not as many people are gonna have it. Now, does the performance you get from the 5600X 3D justify the $70 price difference? Most people who are getting Ryzen 5s are gamers. They're not gonna be content creators. They're not people using it for multi-core stuff. If you're wanting the best Ryzen 5 that utilizes the AM4 socket type still, obviously the 5600X 3D is the best one you can go with. If price isn't really an issue, you got the best Ryzen 5 with the AM4 socket type. The 5600X is a better bang for its buck. It uses slightly less power, very similar in performance. It's honestly hard to see the differences. Overall, the 5600X 3D is a solid processor. I was really glad to see an improvement of FPS in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Now I wish every game was like this. The thing is, if AMD gave the Ryzen 5 5600X 3D this much of a bump in performance, they would be taking away potential sales from their newer AM5 socket Ryzen 5s. Not only that, they have to make sure this Ryzen 5 isn't as good as the Ryzen 7 5800X and 5800X 3D. So it's interesting that AMD would even release this processor because it kind of clogs the market with so many different options, even though there's not that crazy of a performance increase. The Ryzen 5 usually being a more budget-friendly CPU, I'd like to see it under the $200 mark. The 5600X is perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. You can go with it, you'll be happy. If you're using it strictly for gaming, there's honestly not a reason to go much higher than that. Now the 5500 is a good budget-friendly processor. It's only $100. I actually love that processor. It's restored faith in AMD for me. My wife actually uses it for Hogwarts and it performs well. I did swap out the 5600X 3D in her build without her knowing, and I asked her, hey, do you see a difference in your gaming? Does it look better? Is it smoother? And she just said, it looks good. According to my wife, it makes a difference. She says it's good. Now, like I said, if you're gonna be starting your new PC build from scratch and your processor budget is around $230, I personally would go with the Ryzen 5 7600 and pay the extra 50 bucks just so that I can get a system that's a little more future-proof. Overall, the 5600X is a better value. Now, if money isn't an issue, but you don't want to upgrade your motherboard, by all means, the 5600X 3D is better, but I don't know if it's $70 better. But anyways, if you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Every video that I post, I strive to make more sicko mode than the last. And like always, have a sicko mode day.